stigma that Leanne Maskell knows all too well. She was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 25, and after an adolescence that she describes as chaotic. It was a diagnosis that saved her life, frankly, and allowed her to write the book ADHD, an A to Z. It's also a condition that I was diagnosed with when I was 8. So, remarkably, Leanne and I both were able to respond to our emails in time and get an interview together. This is incredible. This should never have happened, but it did. Just a heads up as well, by the way, this interview tackles some difficult themes, and it includes references to suicide and suicidal ideation. Maybe a difficult listen for some. When I spoke to Leanne earlier this evening, I began by asking what her life was like growing up.
For me, I was only diagnosed with ADHD at 25, so that gave me a very helpful context for my younger years. But basically, like, always feeling like I didn't fit in, being bullied at school, and actually I moved country a couple of times, but I moved to Cyprus when I was 12. So I was always, like, on the go and, like, had quite a chaotic upbringing myself anyway. So, but then, like, really struggled to focus at school, but weirdly managed to get good grades in my exams alongside, like, drinking and smoking and doing all these chaotic teenage things. So it was a pretty hard time growing up, and being an adult is much easier in my experience, but then especially being diagnosed with ADHD really helped me put it all into context and actually start, like, I did feel like actually being in control of my life rather than just having it all happen to me and feeling like I didn't fit in and not knowing what on earth I was going to do with my life.
So are there bits of your character and perhaps your behaviour in childhood that, on reflection with the ADHD diagnosis, you were able to look back and go, actually, that was a product of the ADHD?
Yeah, for sure, pretty much.
Or like, and moments, presumably.
Yeah, when I was writing that book, the ADHD and A to Z book, I learned that your nervous system can actually disengage and you can just fall asleep from boredom if you've got ADHD.
Wow.
And I used to do that all the time in school. Like, I would just actually fall asleep in the classes. And I was always having to, like, rock on my chair and move around. But I was always very, like, now I feel like the stereotype for kind of ADHD schoolgirls is, like, the dreamy girl looking out the window, which is pretty much what I was like. I was always actually sneaking headphones under my hair to listen to music whilst the teacher was talking, and, like, skipping ahead to the end of, like, books because I was just reading right to the end and then having to go back when it was my turn to read out in class. So yeah, it's really interesting looking back at it as an adult and saying, like, wow, and now that all makes sense, and just not knowing how to even talk to other kids. Like, I think the most difficult part was, like, break times and being, like, having to talk to other kids. And I actually used to concoct these very elaborate plans to not go to school, like getting up early and setting the kettle and holding my head over the kettle to, like, look like I had the temperature to my mum so that she would let me not go to school. But then very rarely worked. So,
but you found communicating with other kids difficult, did you?
Yeah, I found all of it quite difficult. Yeah, and I think especially with the other kids, like, because I was, like, bullied a lot as a younger person, and especially I had that added complexity of being a model from the age of 13, which is not a very good childhood hobby to be doing. But
quite a toxic world and lots of pressures and expectations and.
Yeah, I actually was here at the time, it was like 5 years ago, for a different book called The Model Manifesto. Right. But that really, it was not a good, like, way to live your life as a child or even as an adult. That kind of world, it's, like, very, very toxic, a lot of body pressure.
In what way, if I may ask?
Yeah, I think for me as a very young person, I always had the weird, bizarre reality of, like, seeing myself in magazines. And I was only, like, 13 years old when I was in Vogue. And I could see myself as this filtered version, like a woman, in, like, a women's wear campaign that I just didn't look like in real life. And then had a lot of, like, horrible experiences, like men getting me changed and stuff, like, which just shouldn't be happening to kids, but is taken for granted in the modelling world. So I had a lot of, like, very bizarre experiences happen to me quite young, that then to be in a school environment and, like, other kids just chatting about, you know, they found it very easy to just chat away, and I was always overthinking everything and, like, just didn't know how to, like, chat and relax with people because my brain always felt like it was going a million miles an hour.
Right, wow. And if you don't mind me bringing this up, I believe it got quite serious, right? That you're trying to sort of figure out who you were and coping with this led you to suicidal ideation?
Yeah, But
And
luckily
you've
I've got ADHD, it didn't follow through. Here I am. I'm getting the stand-up.
Yeah. And are you okay to talk about that? You don't mind talking about
definitely. It's something I feel really passionate about talking about, because that's pretty much what led me to getting the diagnosis and seeking out help, because I grew up feeling kind of like troubled, but just thought I was being dramatic, didn't really ever talk to anybody about how I was feeling. And then once I went to university, managed to get through that, but like really didn't go to hardly any lectures, was like always drinking, and I like drank a lot of alcohol to deal with just the overall anxiety of being alive. And then after graduating, that's when things became really bad, because I didn't have a structure anymore of like school or university to like have something to go to. And I could get good exam results because I could teach myself something quite quickly, do an exam in it, but then I couldn't remember any of that information. It really destroyed my own like self-confidence, because I could get A's, but I didn't know really how I'd managed to get them, because as my teacher said, like I didn't actually pay attention in class, so they thought I'd cheated. And so I did feel in a way like I had cheated, because I hadn't learned like other people, but I hadn't like looked at my notes. I just memorized them the day before. And then when I had graduated, like just tore myself apart trying to figure out what job to do, what career path to go down. Like it felt like getting an office job seemed like a prison sentence, but also I couldn't get an office job because I would just apply scattergun to any kinds of jobs I could find. And every time I got rejected, got so upset and felt like I just didn't fit into like normal society. Started booking flights and going all around the world. And so it was a weird world again, because my life looked really good from the outside, but internally it was just a chaotic mess. And it was like, just as my solution to the problem was like book a new flight to somewhere else, book a new flight, like get drunk, do the same things in a different country. Made like a lot of really erratic, stupid decisions, like a partner visa with someone that I didn't know. And it was just exhausting, really tiring. And eventually I became really suicidal. And that's kind of what led me to get help in the end. Had like a year of just waking up pretty much every day wishing that I hadn't woken up, but knowing that if I tried to kill myself, I wouldn't work. I was like I could rationally think about it, which was what was really bizarre about the situation. It was just like suicidal ideation, where like I knew that objectively speaking, my life was very good. I was very fortunate to be able to do whatever I wanted. So I couldn't figure out why I couldn't actually do that. Which I thought if I told anyone that, I just sound like I'm completely, there's something seriously wrong there, because like it's so simple. And when I did talk to doctors a little bit, they were like, "You're fine. You've got a law degree. You're doing modelling." And it's like, yeah, I know, I should be fine. I don't know why I can't like just calm down. Right. And that's kind of what led me in the end to get to the point where I had a plan to end my life, but. Fortunately, like when it came to it, I just decided actually like I should try and get help first, and ended up making that book, The Model Manifesto. I was like, if I kill myself, it's like, sorry if this is really bad to say on the radio
it's
the world, but
honest.
I was like, because I was in this place where I could rationalize it, and I was quite young at the time, and I was like, it's such a waste of my life. Like, why don't I go and volunteer in Africa? If you don't want to live anymore, like you should do something with your body and your life. But I thought modelling had been a big result of all of the struggles. And that seemed to be something I really struggled to quit as well. So I decided to write this book about it to try and help at least other models from getting to that position. And that's kind of what got me through, because I was like, okay, write the book and then you can kill yourself. I was like, once you've written the book, then you can then you can end your life. But that was what kind of the bizarre deal that my brain had made with itself. But ironically, that's actually what led me to be diagnosed with ADHD, because I knew that I wouldn't actually be able to finish writing that book unless I got help, because I could write most of it, but then I couldn't do any of the bits like formatting and like the follow-up and the editing. And that's when I ended up being diagnosed with ADHD, and then actually I decided to stay alive. And here we are, a few years later.
So that ADHD diagnosis saved your life?
Yeah, definitely. And that's really why I wrote that book as well, because when I was first diagnosed with ADHD, like I didn't think it was a real condition, especially not one that resonated with me. I took the psychiatrist a list of like 10 conditions that I believed I had. And I was like, how is it possible that one person has got all of these conditions? Like, there is something seriously wrong with me. And he was like, no, you've not got any of this. You've just got ADHD. I was like, that's not a real problem. I've got a real problem. He was like, yeah, like you've got really bad ADHD. And he was right.
But you felt that wasn't a real problem. So you felt that, and as in you sort of knew that ADHD existed, but you didn't necessarily believe it. Which is a train of thought. There are people that believe that it. Less so these days, I think, but it is there.
I think I see it a lot these days in the media and stuff, because it's,
we'll come on to that.
It's being talked about a lot more now. Like 5 years ago when I was diagnosed, I didn't know anybody with it at all. And now every single person I talk to knows someone with it, or they think they've got it. Like, so I can see why, and I can understand, people that think like that, because that's how I thought when I was diagnosed as well. Right. I was like, this has got nothing to do with me feeling suicidal or not being able to pay attention. Like, that's a completely different condition. But I, the things that I do know to be true are that, like, since getting treatment for the ADHD and like learning how to actually live with it, I don't feel suicidal anymore. So whatever label you want to put on it, it works. And it's difficult because I also think like we are living in a world where now there is so much kind of like social media information about ADHD and people talking about it and people wondering if they've got it or not. And we also do live in a world with a lot of distractions, like an attention economy. So it is really hard, and people are being exploited into wondering whether they've got it or not. But that's something I try to advocate a lot, and why for example, I'm really happy to talk about my experiences now, especially in relation to the suicide bits, because like actually there's a 5 times higher risk of suicide for people with ADHD. Really? But that's not something people ever really think about or talk about. And when you see these like, posts on social media of like, oh, maybe you've got ADHD if you can't pay attention, like, it's really important to talk about how bad it can really be, and like the importance of getting help for that early on. For me, I think the real turning point was when I had ADHD coaching. Like, I managed to get my job in law, and then I was scraping money together for therapy, and I found out about this government program called Access to Work, which could pay for ADHD coaching. And then I met a woman who had been in a similar position to me. She was like a lawyer, and she left her job to set up a ADHD coaching company, and she could just understand me. And I was like, there is someone out there that has been through what I've been through. I am not completely alone. Oh my, and it was just the most amazing experience, because I think having ADHD can feel really, really lonely. And like the things I've just described to you, they're an odd sense of like invalidating yourself, because you're like, this isn't a real problem. I'm not like, I can get out of bed, I can look like I'm fine, and that all comes with like the masking of the symptoms and being able to present yourself as fine or post something on Instagram. But then the reality of it is so overwhelming to even try and figure out by yourself. So for me, having someone else that had been through that and could help me actually implement systems that worked for me was really, really life-changing, and why I'm now an ADHD coach as well.
Yeah. So. Just for those, I guess, who are sort of still trying to wrap their head around what it is, what it's about.
Yeah.
Just take us into your day-to-day and the role that ADHD plays in your day-to-day.
Oh, I'd like to start from last night at 1 o'clock in the morning when my brain woke me up. I was asleep, and it was like, I think I was dreaming, and I had this dream, or like, I basically started thinking of a stand-up comedy script. And I was like, we don't need to do this right now. And my brain was like, blah, 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 it's going to stop. I think actually the first line of it would be like, hello, welcome. I'm Leanne, I'm crazy. Not really, but you're the ones that paid to see me. So what does that make you? And I'm being like, actually, I'm not crazy. Crazy is a bad word to say. I'm just disordered. Much better. Right. Anyway, so that's my day-to-day. And so I woke up and I was like, for God's sake, fine. Put the light on, like wrote it all out for an hour. I was like, I really do not need to do this. There is no world in which we need to do a stand-up comedy show. Then was Googling stand-up comedy shows, like, to do. I was like, really should never let anyone hear that. And now I've just said that on the radio to you, and I hope that you can cut that out somehow. And
that's going in. But I suppose what happened there is what's often known as hyperfocus.
Yeah,
where
it's
something
exhausting.
Something kicks in, and the sort of almost the opposite of not being able to not be able to sort of hold your attention on something happens, and you become obsessed with it.
Yeah, this is my life.
Sometimes at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Does that happen? Okay, so there's the hyperfocus element, which means that things click like that. What is there something in the way that you sort of the day-to-day tasks, day-to-day relationships, emotional regulation?
Oh, hell. All absolute hell. I'm very good at work. Very bad at everything else. Right. Very good at ADHD coaching. Right. Not so good at implementing it. But like yesterday as well, for example, I got my first haircut in 2 years because my friend said, like, I really struggle with, like, ADHD has object permanence. So I really struggle to remember to keep up with people. If I don't see them or if I'm not talking to people, I forget that they exist. I'm like, I should text. So I'm trying to make an effort to, like, text people and, like, be like, let's meet up. And my friend said, I'm going to get a haircut. And I was like, can I come with you? And I was like, I need to get the haircut, but I've not been able to book somewhere because everything looks exactly the same. So I went and got a haircut with her. And I think it's, so with ADHD, you've got this interest-based nervous system, which means, like, if you're interested in something, it will be really easy. That's how I've written 3 books. Largely, like I just said, at like 4 o'clock in the morning with my brain waking me up being like, right, get up right now. But if you're not interested in something, like changing your bed sheets, which I really personally struggle with, and just have the same ones forever, because why change them if they're not, like, moldy? That can be really hard. So it's like the day-to-day bits that are, like, administrative, boring, like filing, tax things, and I can get really, really overwhelmed and really incredibly anxious about them, and, like, be on the phone crying to people, and they're just like, what on earth is wrong with you? Like, it's not a big deal. But I will overthink them and turn them into huge things and get really anxious about doing the right thing. And often it's actually very, very simple as an answer. But, like, the hard things are really easy because I think people with ADHD, they really thrive on mental stimulation and, like, challenges. But, like, basically the boring things or, like, the everyday, day-to-day bits are much harder. So I think that's, again, why a lot of women struggle, because, like, they often have a bit more expectation of doing, like, housework and, like, looking after that, as well as having a full-time job and looking after children, for example, which fortunately I do not have to do.
Yeah. So some people would say, and some people do say to that, well, I don't like changing the bed sheets either. I don't have ADHD. But I don't change the bed sheets, and but I do like doing this thing, and that's just life, right? Yes, the thing you enjoy you find easy, and the thing you don't want to do you find hard. So what's the difference between that in everyday life and that experience for somebody with ADHD?
Yeah, good question. And if you think this way, I really feel you, because it's right? Like, I think that's what is complicated with ADHD is like, it's like, well, everyone feels that way. And that's how I was when I was diagnosed. I was like, no one can concentrate. So, like, surely that's not a real problem. But from what I understand is, like, everybody loses their keys from time to time, but not everybody is losing their keys, like, every week, being locked out of their house. As happened to me just this month, where I had to go to my dad's house at like 6 o'clock in the morning, which I fortunately, because of my coaching, have managed to put keys in different places. But yeah, it's like these things happen to some people sometimes. But, for example, in the last month, I've also set my oven on fire and had to have the whole fire brigade come over, and, like, because I put a pie too high in the oven, like, it's just like kind of the month before that, I had the hot water bottle explode in my face and, like, had to go. But yeah, I would guess something like that. Like, I filled up a hot water bottle that people kept telling me, like, don't fill it all up to the top. You're not meant to put boiling water in it. But I just forgot all of these things and just carried on doing the same thing over and over again because executive functioning challenges, ADHD. And then it exploded in my face, all over me. But I had a group coaching session, and I tried to carry on doing the group coaching session whilst my face was burning off, and was being like, I'm fine. Don't you guys worry? And they were all like, you need to go to the hospital right now. And I was like, I think it's probably going to be okay. And they're like, no, it's not going to be okay. And they're like, you have to go to A&E. So
I guess what we're talking about there is extremes, right?
Yeah,
extremes
pretty much.
And I suppose, if I may, the way I like to describe that, when people ask me that question, is well, it's the difference between depression and being sad.
Exactly, yeah.
Everybody gets sad, but depression is a profoundly different experience.
You gave a much better answer than me.
Well, no. No, not at all. No, but everybody's experience that's different, and I suppose that's the bit that's kind of hard to get through to people, isn't it? I find, anyway.
Yeah, when I do talks for companies, I usually start them by counting to 10, and I say, like, who lost count at what number? Because actually, as a society, I think our average attention span is now like 3 seconds long, and before we get distracted and onto something else. But I was like, and then I asked them who here thinks they've got ADHD or has ever considered that. I'm like, you probably don't have it. Like, to be diagnosed with ADHD, you have to have 2 or more areas of your life that have been significantly negatively impacted for a long time. by these symptoms of inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. So it's like, just because we all might, get distracted by our phones, for example, from time to time, or we might all, find it hard to concentrate on what someone's saying whilst watching TV at the same time, when we move from like the TV to the laptop to the phone. Not everybody's life is in this state of chaos. And I've got friends that definitely could meet the criteria for ADHD if they're in a different environment. Like I've got this friend, we ran an ADHD retreat together last year, and she's an energy healer, and she just flies around like a little fairy. She can't like stay indoors for longer than like 1 hour. She's like constantly on the go, and like so much actually hyperactivity than everyone that came on the retreat, which is really ironic. But she wouldn't be diagnosed with ADHD because these things aren't a problem for her. Like she's actually living a life that suits her, and so there's no disorder there. And that's what I think can get really complicated in these discussions about things like ADHD as a disability and or as a superpower, because there are lots of brilliant aspects to it. But I think the way that I approach it is like, if you can make your environment suit you, then you can live a life when it's amazing. But I think the whole thing of the ADHD is like, as a society, especially when you look at these poor children that are forced to sit on the computers during pandemic for like 8 hours and then sit on their phones afterwards and do homework, and like that's just not a natural thing for human beings to be doing. And whilst some of them might be better able to do that than others, like then some of them are going to be diagnosed with ADHD, for example. But like ultimately, these are just labels that we give people as human beings, like whether it's ADHD, depression, autism, whatever it is, they're all things that human beings have thought up and categorized people into certain categories. And that's not to say that it's not real in any way, but it's to say like everyone, if you're struggling with anything, then you deserve to get help for that, regardless of what level of extremity that you're at. But I think for people now that are wondering if maybe they've got ADHD and maybe they need help and wondering whether they should go and get an assessment, I think it's really important to just look at your life and think like I did earlier on, which is like, okay, where are the challenges and what am I experiencing? Like, is this really severely impacting my life? Because it's not like a personality quiz, or it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be like, oh yes, you've got all of these marks, woohoo, great.
Yeah.
Put it on your LinkedIn bio. It's like, it's actually, we forget, I think, because of all these discussions and celebrities and stuff, like it is actually a neurodevelopmental condition.
Yeah.
I hope that made sense.
No, it did definitely make sense. Yeah, absolutely. This book is brilliant.
Thank you.
I'm really glad you've written it for obvious reasons. You talk about experiencing, you're talking to other people who have ADHD being quite a cathartic experience. I don't know whether this has been good radio, but I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, good, I'm glad.
I've had a lovely time. And it is incredibly, I mean, it's remarkable we got together to do this, both being ADHD. We're both in the right place at the right time.
Podcast.
Exactly, yeah. And both answered our emails at the right time. I guess, if somebody is listening to this and thinking it's hitting all the right notes and they've thought about it for a while, perhaps, and it's something that's, or perhaps their children as well, because I think that's, one thing, isn't it? It's encouraging parents to think about it in their kids. If they were to say, Leanne, just give me one piece of advice, where do I go next? What do I do? What do I do with myself now?
Read the book.
Okay. That is a solid answer.
Read the book. That book, I basically wrote it for myself to understand what it was exactly. Because I was just like, okay, what you see on the internet when you Google ADHD is not what I was experiencing. So I got really determined to understand every single part of it, from sleep to time management to meditation and mindfulness, everything. I just got really determined to understand what it actually was. And I hope that's what the book does, which is like kind of allows people to coach themselves and gives them all the resources that they need. And I think that whether you're a parent or someone that's going through it, or someone that is going through it, the most important thing to remember is like that you're not broken, and to try and stop Googling it. That's the key thing, is stop overthinking whether you do or do not have ADHD, because I think if you feel like it resonates with you, then congratulations, you probably have ADHD. Great. Now what are you going to do next? Like, that's the key point. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier, is like, look at how your life is right now, how much you're using your strengths, like how much does your life suit you, and how much are you trying to force yourself into what you think it should look like, and try to make little changes that can help you with that. And find other people to talk to that are in your position as well, I think is a really key thing, because I do think it's like community element that is really, really amazing. And that's, we're so lucky to see in the media now, like there's so many people out there talking about it, and it's such a much more accepted thing right now compared to like when I was diagnosed 5 years ago. And that's why I wrote that book, because I had no one to talk to. So hopefully it can help someone else that's like in the same position.
Leanne Maskell speaking to me earlier, the author of ADHD and A to Z, with us on Times Radio. Just to